still have some people joining, but we're going to get underway just so that we can start right at 11 o'clock. I want to welcome everyone to the Future of Cities event brought to you by CityAge and our friends at Communitech. Today marks the launch of a very special program. Communitech, one of North America's preeminent hubs for innovators, entrepreneurs, and public policy leaders, is launching its Future of Cities collaborative. We're calling it Next is Now. That's because this pandemic, as well as the technological, social, and environmental shifts of our turbulent age, demands that we make smart decisions and take action in how we build the future of our cities. In fact, the current health crisis is making it even more important to reimagine the future of our cities. Today is a chance for leaders like yourself to tap into Communitech's unique ecosystem of innovators and entrepreneurs. Today is about us helping you implement the positive changes we all want and must implement for the future of the world's cities. My name is Naomi Parnas, a journalist and broadcaster, and I'm your host today. CityAge has been collaborating with Communitech for almost a decade in events around Canada and the United States. The reason is that since being founded in 1997 by a group of seasoned entrepreneurs who came together to help others build successful companies, Communitech has gotten results. Communitech has helped kickstart hundreds of companies on that cutting edge of technology with both national and global impact. The Future of Cities Collaborative today is designed for you to tap into Communitech's City Initiative to help us build the future of our cities by bringing together the private and public sector ideas and innovations to do what is next now. CityAge would like to thank Communitech and TD for their partnership in making today's event happen, and thank all of you for joining us. Now, I want to give you some Zoom tips on how to get the best out of today's session for many of you who are also joining our 3 breakout rooms later in the day. So first, talk to us. You can use the Q&A section of Zoom to ask questions to our speakers and panelists throughout the program. And here's a very important point. In the chat function at the bottom there, when you comment, make sure to direct your comment to all panelists and attendees. So if you want to switch that right now, then everyone will be able to see what you're talking about. You'll notice that the standard setting right now is just to panelists, so you might want to change that so everyone can see what you're saying. Now, again, before you send a message to the group, make sure that 2 is directed to all panelists and attendees. If you need any help, email us during the session at info@cityage.com, or you can private message Lauren or Mark in the chat box. We also want to make this event as interactive as possible, so let's get started on that now. If everyone can take a moment, go to the chat and tell us your name and where you're Zooming from. I know Mark told us that he's in Vancouver, rainy Vancouver this morning, so I'm in Toronto and we're currently under lockdown. So it's, an interesting world for all of us, but let us know where you are. I want to introduce our first speaker to learn more about the launch of the Future of Cities Collaborative. Kevin leads cluster building initiatives at Communitech. This includes open data, Internet of Things, and digital media to create and accelerate new opportunities in emerging fields to the private sector. In his role as Vice President, Kevin's also responsible for developing and deploying Communitech's international strategy. Communitech now wants to offer cities and companies to collaborate in a new way on our urban future. Please welcome Kevin Tuer, VP of Data and Advanced Technologies at Communitech. Kevin.
Wonderful. Thank you, Naomi. And I'm going to look for your nod to make sure I can be heard and seen. Okay, good to go. And again, thank you to everyone. This is it's good to see everyone today, albeit virtually. We all wish that we could be together, but it's good to come together and talk about such an important topic. And this is intended to be the first of a series of events in our Next is Now series. And of course, the Future Cities event, this one is our first one. As Naomi mentioned, I am Kevin Tuer. I'm the Vice President of Data and Advanced Technologies at Communitech, and Naomi did a great job of introducing Communitech and what we do. We are based in the region of Waterloo in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. We have a community of more than 1,400 companies that we serve, from startups to scale-ups and to global players. And I am very pleased that we have this opportunity to once again partner with CityAge on such an important topic. And I also want to thank TD for their willingness and their sponsorship of this event as well. So collaboration has been a key element of everything that Communitech has done over our 23 plus years of existence. And we have helped create ecosystems around digital media, open data, future of retail and future work and learning. And more recently, our community response to COVID-19 resulted in a Future of Health collaborative with our local hospitals as partners, not only responding to the needs around personal protective equipment, but also there's this desire to explore the role of the tech sector in healthcare delivery as we move through and beyond COVID-19. And as I mentioned, this event marks really the launch of the Community Tech Future of Cities Collaborative. And let me tell you a little bit about what that collaborative is and why it matters. The Future City Collaborative that we're launching today brings together cities and municipalities with solution providers to co-create solutions to problems using a challenge-based format. It is a chance to leverage the innovative power of startups, scale-ups, and large corporations as we collectively tackle small or large problems that cities face now and in the future, leveraging the power of digital and data along the way. And I'll dig a little bit further into the Future Cities Collaborative model during the panel that's going to occur a little later on in our agenda. So with this in mind, the Future of Cities event, this event is an opportunity for us to come together and share challenges, progress, ideas, and solutions. The Future Cities Collaborative is the means by which we co-create these solutions, where success is going to be measured by the progress we make in solving these problems. And so, most importantly, the discussion does not end with the conclusion of this event. Instead, it's intended to fuel the actions and activities of the collaborative. And then we'll come back and have a look at how we did at our next event. So it's essentially to wash, rinse, and repeat. So we hope that you enjoy the event. And most importantly, we hope that you take the opportunity to contribute to the conversation. It is a large conversation, it matters, and we need your input. So again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you through the rest of the event. Over to you, Naomi.
Thank you, Kevin. And we're just going to ask if everyone who's on can just shut off their cameras. So we just have the people who are speaking with their cameras on. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you, Kevin. At CityAge, we're always fascinated by multidisciplinary leaders, people who move in different sectors and have a record of collaboration. Our first presenter is exactly that. He's helped police departments use data to improve public safety. He's been the ambassador for a global industry leader in smart cities and data. He's been a leader in the military and also as an entrepreneur who has run his own businesses. He recently brought this multivaried set of experience to his new job, Director, Innovation and Technology, City of Sioux Falls. Please welcome Mike Grigsby.
Good morning, Naomi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. That's my thumbs up that you can hear me.
Okay,
I am going to go ahead and share my screen here in just 1 second. Good morning, everyone. I am coming to you from the southern Canada, or South Dakota, United States, as some people might like to call it. I have landed in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I've been here since April of this year. I decided to move my family in the middle of the pandemic, which was challenging to say the least, but it was opportunistic and it was definitely the right time to kind of pick this back up and take the smart city approach and come at it from a different angle. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today is just how do we look at the human connection when we start talking about smart cities. And if you've been in the smart city game for a little bit of time, a lot of our conversation has centered around data, networks, sensor technology, emergent technologies. There's been a lot of discussion about the overlay of technologies on top of cities and what cities are doing, and certainly using data to infuse our decision making. As Naomi mentioned, my background prior to being at the City of Sioux Falls, I worked for Cisco Systems on their Global Smart and Connected Communities team. I was there, had the opportunity to work with a lot of national leaders, a lot of state and provincial leaders, did a lot of work up in Canada, and really helped see the smart city footprint grow. And one of the things I wanted to do really was provide some education and awareness around what a smart city is and what we should really be focused in on under those kinds of initiatives. Prior to joining Cisco, I worked for the city of Kansas City, Missouri for 13 years. I was there with the police department as the chief information officer. and then ended up as the Chief Information Officer for the Regional Transportation Authority in the Kansas City metropolitan area. So as I mentioned, if you've been in the smart city game or heard the term smart city, a lot of times we talk about what the data and the networks are going to do for cities. And, you know, depending on where you read this information, the numbers change, but we know that estimates show, you know, by 2030 and beyond, we're going to have a lot of devices connected to the internet. And this is, you know, connected appliances, wearables, connected automobiles, certainly more from a connected city, and what that means and what that's going to do and the pressures that that's going to put on our current infrastructure, not just our technology infrastructure, but our physical infrastructures, doing that, looking at how that builds out from a financial standpoint, economic standpoint, and what the opportunities that creates for cities. So I got into the smart city game in 2012. Kansas City was just making its entryway into that space. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and got connected to a lot of the projects that Kansas City had done early in 2012 up through about 2018. And one of the things that we did was looking at our physical infrastructure and some of those changes and what that meant. And again, the idea of cities collecting information or having this technology mapped on top of it got people moving in a certain direction. And, you know, the idea that our cities are these vibrant ecosystems is something to understand and really grasp. But more so than that, what we learned is in all the discussion with smart cities, we learned that cities were already collecting data. You know, we had crime data, we had weather data, we had census data, we were putting out Wi-Fi, we were putting out safety and security systems and solutions. Lighting was a big one, water was a big one, parking, smart parking and smart environments. These were all huge initiatives and a lot of trends for those first, what I'll say for those first 5-7 years in that smart city foray. And we saw this across the globe. It wasn't just in the United States, wasn't just in North America. We saw this across the globe. We saw huge lighting, huge transportation, huge water solutions being put around in these cities around the globe. And a lot of the emphasis was placed on large cities. We saw huge metropolitan areas in Japan, in China. We saw them in New Zealand, in Spain. Barcelona was a huge one. And we saw some of this happen again in New York, in LA, and Austin, Texas, and so forth. So a lot of these large cities were jumping on this bandwagon. And what we needed to realize, and time has really showed us and revealed this to us, is that smart cities are about people. At the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is move the needle for Joe and Jill Q citizen. This is something that cities have already been doing for eons. And when we think about it in terms of smart cities, we almost get distracted by the term and forget what we're trying to accomplish. And that is increasing and improving the quality of life of our citizens. So when we look at this, our cities have collected lots of data around all of the different systems and structures that we have in place. And I think it's important to understand that when we are putting these systems in place, we need to look at how this is going to, what effect it's going to have on our people. And we need to think about it in terms of empathy. How are cities delivering services to their constituents? And in some of the recent studies that I've done, I happened upon some work that the city of Boston was doing in their website redevelopment. And in their strategic objectives for that, I think they brought about or highlighted 2 points that I think we could all really take notice on and really drive home. And their first objective was be a helpful human first. So all of our systems, all of our solutions, we should really be focusing on how can we be a helpful human and helpful to humans first. The other objective that they had was be equal parts warm and official. And I think those two pieces are something that we really need to focus in on as we look at our strategies, what we've already implemented, and then what we plan on doing moving forward. As I mentioned just a moment ago, a lot of the cities were focused on, we saw a lot of this work early on in large cities. But in 2018, the U.S. Conference of Mayors did a survey, and what they found was that of the 335 existing smart city projects, 50% of those projects were being done and kicked off in mid-sized cities. Another 29% were in small cities. Only 21% of those projects were from what we would consider large metropolitan areas. And as they looked at it again through that survey and through the respondents' comments, they realized that the numbers looked almost identical going into the future. So another 459 projects were looked at into 2020 and beyond. And again, you see almost half of those smart city projects are occurring in mid-sized cities. Some of the objectives that they were focused in on were improving operational efficiency. They were looking to find ways to be more responsive to the citizens' needs. I think all of us on the call today can say that, you know, from 2007 till now, we've seen a change in demand from our constituents, and we're not able to pace correctly with that. So increasing that responsiveness was huge. And then also enhancing citizen engagement. And unfortunately, I don't have time to go into each one of these, but they deserve their own unpacking, if you will, to understand how those are going to affect other cities, how they're going to affect the cities. And some of the project domains that they were looking at was governance, mobility and transportation, and physical infrastructure. And if anything jumps off the page when I show those project domains, is that this isn't really new and cutting edge, right? This is what cities have been doing for a long time. The governance aspect of it, the mobility and the transportation and the physical infrastructure. The idea is to kind of dig out the benefits, dig out the value out of the things that cities are already doing. You don't really have to go into the new and emergent and cutting edge. There's still a lot of value to be gained from what cities have been doing for a very, very long time. And, you know, one of the things that we have to do also is it shows us, looking at that, is start small, think big, and move fast. You've got to be agile. You've got to be nimble. And the other thing that I've been using, term I've been using here lately, is we have to learn the language of use cases. A lot of times the cities that I worked with early on when I was with Cisco, they had ideas of projects that they wanted to implement, but they didn't understand the outcome and the impact of those projects. For example, they may say we want public Wi-Fi, but when we dig further and we ask the city, why do you want public Wi-Fi? There wasn't a real tangible understanding of what those outcomes and what those impacts were going to be. So if the cities don't understand that, certainly from a leadership standpoint, it makes it even more difficult for the constituents to understand and get behind and support those projects moving forward. So again, I don't have time to unpack all of this, but it is definitely worth noting that understanding the outcomes and defining what those outcomes and impacts are early on is absolutely crucial to the ongoing and sustainable success. So 2020 has thrown us a curve, and it not so much specifically from a technology standpoint, but COVID has taught us a lot this year, and its impact globally has really brought a lot of things to the surface, and it's things we should be paying attention to, right? If you look at what your city had to do to respond to the demands of COVID-19, start thinking about what you did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago that allowed you to take advantage and make the pivots that you needed to this year. Those are bell-ringing celebratory moments, and the city should step back and really take kind of a pat on the back process from that, because you did that with foresight in mind, not knowing what curves you were going to be thrown in 2020, and certainly not understanding what 2020 or what COVID-19 has thrown at us. The other thing that it has shown us is it's our reliance upon technology. As organizations and communities started sending people home, remote workers, quarantines, our reliance upon technology really came to the forefront. And finding ways to get connected, finding creative ways to get connected, finding ways to keep our economy stimulated and do this in new and innovative ways was really a pressure upon cities and communities that a lot of them have stepped up to the challenge, and a lot of them have done well. You know, yes, we took some hits, but by and large, we were able to do that. And that is because of the infrastructure that we had already put in place and some of the thinking that we had done. I know for our own city here, we were able to implement in a matter of weeks things that we couldn't have done in years prior. So some of that pressure allowed us to move forward very, very quickly. And that's very, very important for us to keep in mind. Another thing that it did was it exposed the impact and the reality of the digital divide. I know this term has been around for several years, and a lot of communities are doing really, really well in this. But this COVID really caught a lot of communities off guard on this from a digital divide standpoint. And the importance of having connectivity, the importance of having access to devices, but more importantly, the understanding of digital literacy and the negative impacts on that. Just because you get connected, just because you have the device, what do you do from that point forward? And really understanding and pushing a message of quality of life. I think that's the one thing that we really understood through COVID is understanding the power and the necessity of quality of life. The other thing too is think about the pressures that this change in environment put on us from a public works standpoint. Instead of people being in business buildings or facilities where they are commercially sized, we sent most of our community back home. And again, the volume of pressure from either sewer lines to lighting to transportation to grocery stores and even toilet paper and things along those lines. These were pressures that we weren't anticipating previously from this. The other thing that it revealed is that a lot of cities still operate in silos, meaning the public works is different than public safety, is different than economic development, is different from planning and development. And where we really saw this was when we could not share that data to get keener insights into what was going on in the city, and more importantly, how to do some pivots and where we were really needed. And I've said for a long time that the purpose of a smart city is really to do faster pattern recognition and to do smarter resource allocation, right? How do we understand what's going on, and then how do we have an appropriate and corresponding response to that? This really came to the forefront as we saw a lot of our data was still in silos, separated in ways that we couldn't mingle that information together. And then lastly, COVID reminded us that everything depends on everything else. There is a synergy and a symbiosis that happens within the cities, within our communities. We really are reliant upon others. I took a tour last week of some of our public works facilities, and I'm just amazed at the codependency that all of our facilities and all the things that are going on within cities, that we really don't understand how all of that plays together. And that's one of the things that we should be focusing on as we move forward. So I want to talk about very quickly as I try to wrap up here, what does it look like from a mid-city standpoint? How are some of the smaller cities taking advantage of smart city opportunities? And last year, the city of Kitchener, I was fortunate to be involved in a project with Simcon Lighting to help bring keener insights through data to a cycling master plan. And what was interesting, I think, about this project was that the IoT sensors were used to collect data and inform insights ahead of the project that was going to be forthcoming. A lot of times we talk about implementing a project and then collecting data from those sensors after the fact. This was a little bit of a reverse, and the city was able to use that data to then look ahead and kind of gather the insights from that, and then make pivots within that master plan and bring a very, very formidable plan to the city. You know, one of the things that it does, it really focused in on the safety and security. I think that is something that's very, very central to small cities, to all cities, but they feel it very closely in smaller cities. And then it also helps with the diverse use of resources. You know, typically when cities start doing traffic counts, we use the traditional on-road transportation traffic counting and things like this. This was all facilitated through an elevated video sensor technology that allowed the city to collect that information very, very quickly, get daily accurate daily bicycle counts, pedestrian counts, and vehicle counts. And so I use this as an example to say that it's not just about collecting data after you put something in. The data can inform you and help drive the directions that the cities are going to go or where they choose to go on that. So this was a quote for those of you in the U.S. I really wanted to change that, change realize to have a Z in it, but I wanted to keep the comment, the quote as pure as possible. But I think this is really important. You know, data gives our decision makers the insight needed to realize our goal of building people-friendly transportation options in our community. And that goes back to what I was saying, that you have to learn the language of use cases. You have to know what the community impacts and outcomes are going to be. And this is just a sampling. This is just a handful of some of the impacts and outcomes cities should be focused in on as they are looking at these initiatives. And then also is trying to figure out what are the things you're already doing that drive into these. So you're looking from citizen center. Obviously, we have to make this people-centric. Where the organizational and operational efficiencies we're getting, obviously inclusivity is huge. Safety and security is huge. We already saw from the Conference of Mayors that increased responsiveness is also there. And then sustainability. When I toured the landfill last week, I was amazed at how many cubic yards of dirt is moved to accommodate our refuse. And then we're still focused in on the amount of space that we're trying to maintain there. So that having that sustainable viewpoint long term is a huge benefit to cities as they move forward. And then ultimately, we have to remember that this is for our citizens, right? Everything that we do on the receiving end of that, there's a real live breathing human being that's a beneficiary or in some respects could be a victim of the decisions that we're making. And we have to keep that in mind. We can, smart cities is absolutely about data and networks and emergent technologies. And how do we do this? But that technology should augment our human experiences, not be a replacement for them. And as we focus in on how we deliver this, I'll close my time by talking about keys for success. Obviously, these are not the only ones. These are not the end all be alls, but these are certainly ones that you should be focused in on as you're developing your smart city projects. Refocus on people. I talked about empathy earlier. We have to remember that this is about Joe and Jill Q citizen, right? This is what they need to keep the city moving. In Sioux Falls, we've looked at identifying personas, right? You live here, you work here, you play here, you visit here. Those different personas all require and have different needs, and the city needs to respond to those needs differently. It's not a one size fits all. So keeping people at the center of what we're doing is crucial to our efforts. You need to leverage shovel-ready projects. This is one that kind of gets a little bit, gets missed a little bit of time. When I was in Kansas City, we got our success really because we did exactly this. We had an existing streetcar planned, and out of a $30 million project, looking for an additional $3 million was easier to do than to ask for $3 million outright. And so what we were able to do inside of that streetcar project, we found the additional funds to build our smart city corridor, and we ended up with smart lighting, smart parking, public Wi-Fi, kiosks for wayfinding, and we ended up with the smartest 53 blocks in North America for a very, very long time. And having that comprehensive footprint came because we looked at a shovel-ready project, one that already had funding, that already had approval, and was already moving forward. And there's a lot of value to be found in looking at those shovel-ready projects. Progress, not perfection. Make incremental steps. Look for the small wins, gain momentum, and help the people buy into what the city is trying to do. A lot of times, announcements get made for very large, sweeping initiatives that Joe or Jill Q citizen don't really understand where the value is. We talk about streetlights. We're going to change out all the streetlights. For the average citizen, they know there was a light on their street last night. It was working just fine. Why do we need another one? And without communicating value, we really leave our citizens in the dark. Innovate, innovate, innovate. Cannot say that enough. Need to learn how to think with your imagination and not your memory. Cities are so used to doing the projects that are there, especially when we start looking at physical infrastructure, the changes, we just kind of wash, rinse, repeat. We know that this is going to be a 5-year project, a 10-year project, a 20-year project, and so forth. We have to go back and look at these differently. We also, especially now, so many of us have drafted strategic plans 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even last year, that we didn't have this thing called COVID-19. And we need to look and revisit all of our strategic plans and our initiatives, looking now through the lens of COVID-19. What are those key impacts that are going to have on the city? And then lastly, it's not enough to know, we need to know how. We have to figure out how we're going to move the needle for Joe or Jill Q citizen, and understanding the constituency base on this and where they are really getting that. That is crucial for them to understand. So as we move forward, a lot of the data is showing right now that people are moving from large cities to smaller cities and mid-sized cities. And the question that I would have is, are you ready? What does that mean? And are you ready? What are those impacts going to be as you start to have an influx in those mid-sized cities? I know Sioux Falls is a population of about 200,000, and we're expected to grow by 50,000 in the next 7 years. Think about the stress and pressure that will put on a community. So with that, I will close out and take any questions, or we can just go on to the next one, Naomi.
Thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, we're going to have to move on to the next one because we're running out of time here. So we're just going to move this along. But that was amazing. And I know Mark was saying that people share your contact information because a lot of people had questions for you. So a lot to take in from your presentation. And let's continue talking now, because we're going to go into a panel discussion. This is our first panel. It's a special panel. We think it might be the first time the winners of the 2016 United States Smart Cities Challenge, Columbus, Ohio, and the winner of the 2019 Canadian Smart Cities Challenge, Montreal, have been brought together. These are two of the proven leaders in the implementation of smart cities projects in North America. So we're really excited to dive into this conversation. I want to welcome Jordan Davis, the Director of Smart Cities Columbus for the Columbus Partnership, and Stéphane Guidon, Director, Montreal Urban Innovation Lab for City of Montreal. Please also welcome back Kevin Tuer, VP of Data and Advanced Technologies at Communitech. He's going to join this panel discussion as well. So let's get right in there, because as I said, we want to move along with the time here. I want to talk to the two of you. Describe the winning factor in your Smart City Challenge application and what you've learned so far. I know I did some reading last night, and there's some pretty incredible things. Jordan, the headline in one of the articles I read was, "Can a transit app save babies' lives?" Columbus, Ohio, will find out. So some pretty amazing things. Why don't you tell us both what made you a smart city?
Sure. Thanks, Naomi, and thanks everyone for taking time on a Tuesday to be here learning together. So if we look back all the way to 2016, when we applied for the U.S. Smart Cities Challenge, it was targeted at mid-sized cities. So like Mike said, I think it was right at the beginning when mid-sized cities were really getting in the game of smart cities and trying to figure out what was actually scalable, replicable, what actually worked. There were a lot of really good ideas on some fancy PowerPoints slides, but few had really been proven out in cities at the time. So we had taken the expertise from all the facets of our community, our utility, our university here, the Ohio State University, Battelle, city governments, regional planning commissions, and really put forth our biggest and best ideas for how not only what we thought the technologies were that needed to be proven out in cities, but how they could actually be used and useful. And that gets to that use case language that Mike was talking about. Really, I think we focused on that in our application, and that's one of the reasons why we won. And it was very hard to bring that to life, but I think a commitment to not just deploying technology for technology's sake, but doing it to improve people's lives. Furthermore, I think in these federal investments, they are looking for replicability, and we as a mid-sized city are, I think, this best collection of I don't want to say average, but I think we represent a lot of America in Ohio and in our community. And as a result, what what works in Columbus can work in mid-sized cities, I would argue, anywhere. And so I think that was a big factor. But above and beyond was most definitely our commitment to collaboration. When we put forward our program proposal, we were very direct that we would not be able to do this alone, just city government, and that we would walk hand in hand between the public sector and the private sector. We are a region of about 2.2 million, and our programs were bigger than just our single municipality as well. So we put together what we called the Acceleration Fund, which was a matching investment pool. Was $90 million at the time of application. It grew to right now our total sits at about $720 million. And that is aligned investment and new program investment that's been made across the community and throughout our ecosystem towards the goals of our program. And we operationalized our collaboration and actually how we work. So behind me is our downtown experience center in our office. And so pre-COVID, we had about 50 people working out of here from all different organizations in town that are collaborating on these projects together. And so we not only kind of shook hands and put our money where our mouth is, but we also committed time and people to work on a daily basis next to each other as we embarked on this journey. So those are some of the differentiators, I think, and we've learned a lot along the way, and I look forward to sharing them today.
Thanks, Jordan. Stefan?
Yeah, on our side, so obviously our project is much younger than the Columbus one, although we had the opportunity to discuss with Jordan and look at what Columbus did as we were designing our proposal for the Canadian Smart City Challenge. I'd say that's the three winning factors for us is, first, it was really bottom up. So we really started with what people wanted. So we did surveys and we did co-creation events with citizens and with community groups. And in our case, what it brought, and it relates also to what Mike was saying, is yes, put the people first, but in which context do we look at them? And what became important for us is that the importance of the neighborhood level. So people have, at least in Montreal, but I think it is the case elsewhere, a strong sense in belonging in their neighborhood, and there is a strong willingness to see how both the city but also community group can really support the development of neighborhoods. The second one, obviously, is replicability, as Jordan said. In our case, we really had a process in order to constantly evaluate and eventually improve the project as things were moving forward. So it's really a strong connection toward the why we are doing that, and then agree on the fact that the how and the what we will do might evolve during the 5 years. And it really makes it easier in terms of replicability, because it's not only applicable in other cities, but even for ourselves, what we've designed, we think could serve for other topics that what we are covering, which is basically mobility and access to food. And the last one is collaboration. I think everybody told it. The way we present what we call Montreal in Common, which is the branding that we have now, is as a community of projects. So it's not a handful of projects that are mostly realized by partners, but it's a community. So it's projects that are designed to support each other, to complement each other, and in that dynamic, what my team is doing at the City of Montreal is mainly supporting this network building around the project and providing them tools so that they can reinforce and they can support each other.
So you mentioned, Stefan, collaboration, which is obviously something everyone endorses, but it's hard. Kevin, maybe we can bring you in here. What does it take to make these partnerships work? What's the secret sauce to successful partnerships with the private sector and civil society?
Yeah, it's. I think there's a lot of the concepts have already been raised, but it's the notion of, to me, it's about making sure we have, a common purpose. and bringing to people to collaborate and pulling on the rope in the same direction. And I think it's important about it is to make sure we have that common goal. And I love the continued theme about putting the individual at the core of the value proposition and sort of the raison d'etre of everything that we're doing. And I think that's important. And public engagement, transparency, it's so important to include the citizen in the conversation. I think we are all citizens by our own regard, I guess, in many ways. I guess speaking to a little bit of experience I had in serving on the Digital Strategy Advisory Panel for Waterfront Toronto with the Sidewalk Labs project that was recently unfortunately canceled. It was just, I would say that some of the things that I learned out of that was a focus on the governance part, making sure we have an owner of the governance and make sure that governance is owned by the right group, and just making sure you keep the public involved and make sure you're outcome based.
So I know we're talking, Jordan and Stefan will bring you in here, but in our discussions before this show and also in some of my reading, you guys talked about smart vehicles. There was the talk about this, as I said, the prenatal trip assistance. Like, I'm assuming some of this was a public-private partnership. So how are you guys talking about collaboration in your smart cities?
Yeah, so some more specific examples, exactly to your point, Naomi, of projects. A good one is the prenatal trip assistance project. So we have higher than the national average infant mortality, particularly in our low income, predominantly Black neighborhoods. And one of those barriers is access to healthcare. And so we have sought to bring on-demand kind of ride-sharing technologies that would then be Medicaid reimbursed for people to be able to get to their healthcare appointments in an easier, more convenient and time-efficient manner. That has been an ongoing study and research project. So the results, we don't even have them yet, but it's been going for about a year. And so we're very hopeful that this could become a long-term policy change at the state level for how Medicaid dollars are used. And in that project, our healthcare providers from our neighborhood organizations, grassroots organizers, City Hall, state, and the like. Most of our projects are at a county or regional level, although the municipality managed most of them. But it is a little bit of a unique collaboration as well in that regard. Another aspect, if you think about the future of mobility, which is what we were focused on, was really bringing the future of mobility into our community. So connected, autonomous, shared, electric, all supported by data. Electrification was a very significant collaboration over 3 years, focused on really establishing an electric vehicle market here in the Columbus region. We have been, I would say, a laggard, and that would be a generous term, prior to this. And 80% of the electric vehicles on our roadway were Teslas, and there were very, very few of them. So it was not a mainstream, or not even a real option. So we established it both from every aspect. So we worked with dealers in town, to OEMs, to policymakers on charging infrastructure, our utility, our university on the research side, community organizations, employers were huge. We have an accelerator partner program of 70 employers that employ the largest workforces here, and they bought in to help us educate residents on the future of mobility and electric vehicles more specifically. So we were able to get in front of really intimate ways with about 12,000 residents for an hour at a time to educate them. So there were several different things that would not have been possible unless there was a partner involved. We could have never done it as kind of a project management siloed outside of the community sphere. And you can say that across all of the 8 technology projects that were deployed by the city. I think one of the more interesting ones too are autonomous vehicles, but I think we're going to talk about those, I think, in a later question. So.
Yes, if we have time. I know we're going to try to get to everything. Stefan?
Yeah, on our side, as I said, we are much more younger, so we have not advanced that much in delivering. But as I said, on our side, our focus is really on testing initial small size project and see how we can develop them. So one of the examples that I like to give is a community group named Solon, who have started doing some evaluation in some neighborhood of mobility patterns of people, and discovered that lots of people would like to be able to avoid completely their car and, for example, use their bike to do the groceries. But obviously, doing the groceries with your bike alone doesn't work. So they have started to make self-reservation bike trailers, and it's very low tech. It's very simple the way it works, but it's a success in the sense that lots of people are using it. So it's really giving us insights of the kind of maybe more scaled up, more technology-based things that we could do. For example, linking a digital identity to a more mobility package that would allow, for example, to unlock smart locks for those trailers. So it's really a question of starting with prototypes, eventually low tech, but really testing immediately what's the outcome on the ground with people and see how it works. Always keeping in mind that what works in one neighborhood might not work somewhere else. So it's really a question, again, of replicability, but not replicate only the result, which is in that case the trailer, but more the process in which we found what was the need and then think how we can solve that need.
I think something that everyone obviously is thinking about right now is how the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the adoption of the smart city tech, and how it's changing how everyone is thinking sort of about smart cities. What can you all tell us about some areas that are more impacted than others as a result of the pandemic?
Do you want to go first, Stefan?
Go on. Me? Okay. Yeah. So on our side, we have two domains that are fairly impacted. First one is mobility, and the other access to food. And what's interesting is that they're impacted in a very different way. Mobility has completely changed the pattern. So it's not only a question of less mobility. We all agree that people move a little less, but it's completely different patterns also. And it really raised the question of not only thinking of in the individual mode of transportation, so car, bike, and so on, but really think about a system and how each mode of transportation can work with the other to make the whole system resilient. And that's where it's really interesting to work as a system and not just work on specific modes, is that you want the whole system to be resilient and not only think about one mode of transportation. In terms of access to food, obviously, Mike was mentioning the digital divide, and it's an issue, but there is also the food divide and food deserts. And there's really in that domain an increased need in Montreal, and I think it's the case everywhere. And it's there again. It's also what we discovered during the past 2 years, and it's obviously more obvious now, is that we have local producers that have difficulties to access the market because of issues of logistics, because of issues of lacking transformation and place to stock the food. So there is really, and that's our project on access to food, works to be done to allow smaller players, again, to be part of a larger system that allow them to have access to the market, which is an issue. And currently, it's easier for big, large dealers from abroad to access the market than people who are maybe 50 kilometers from Montreal, but do not have the logistics and the knowledge to access the market.
Jordan, and then we'll go to you, Kevin.
So for us, I mean, COVID has in many ways leapt ahead some of the other aspects of a smart city that we weren't as focused on. I think there's always that bureaucratic inertia that keeps ideas from being approved and authorized, or, you know, we have to go through new processes. And so we've seen, you know, a lot of different things advance, from digital permitting processes and other things be expedited that were kind of always on the when we get to it list. So that's been really encouraging, I think, across the community, not just in the public sector. But I would say, just to what Stefan was talking about in terms of the critical needs and the infrastructure to fill those gaps, has never been more urgent. And with that, I think we're seeing some really creative things out of our food bank system, from 24/7 food lockers to delivery to real-time food availability at our food banks, so that people go where the supply is. So that's been really critical, and I think all of that at the core gets to technology as a really critical ingredient to our resiliency. And as we think about smart cities of the future, I think that how we become more technologically sophisticated and digitally literate, both in terms of our policymakers, in terms of our residents in the neighborhoods, but across the community, in our nonprofits and social services. Those who were further ahead digitally were able to adapt quicker. Those who were not have been really left behind and just haven't been able to be serviced or deliver their services as effectively. And so we've been trying to, as quickly as possible, solve the digital divide. We've been having a full all hands on deck approach to deploying devices. But one of the other things that we're going to be launching here in a few months is new Wi-Fi deployments in 2 neighborhoods to test 2 kind of new Wi-Fi solutions for hopefully getting to affordable solutions that are scalable. So we've confirmed that the broadband exists, but for many residents, they're priced out of access. And so we really need to change that equation on the supply side. So we've been focused there. From a transportation perspective, historic lows in ridership, really reinforcing the role of public transportation and its critical nature for our essential workers in our community. But so few of our large employers are actually back to work. And I think there is a great sensitivity to wanting to share rides when they return to work. And this is a critical recreation of habits era that we'll go through probably the spring of next year. So we're thinking a lot here on, how do we not increase congestion and increase pollution at the same time? How do we solve for this? And I think these are going to be the big decisions, both from a policy perspective, a human behavior perspective, culturally, but how do we build back in a way that we don't create and further exaggerate both the divides and some of these existential threats that our cities are trying to navigate, and how do we do it better? If that gives you a glimpse of some of the things.
Yeah, I want to get to Kevin here because we're going to run out of time soon. So Kevin, what do you think in terms of how COVID has changed sort of the way we think about cities?
In so many different aspects. I mean, I think there's so many examples in terms of what's going on here. I mean, everything that's already been mentioned is certainly applicable. What we've seen is some initiatives. So we have a digital Main Street initiative that started, and that was all focused on helping Main Street businesses pivot to a more online or digital model. And of course, some of the smallest businesses don't necessarily have the resources readily available to do that. So having programming there and engaging them with a number of students that can actually get on the ground and help them to pivot to that model. That's certainly one element of it. Of course, the work from home model, we're all trying to figure out what does work look like going forward, because many of us are still working at home. But the one I wanted to showcase, and I've already alluded to it, was the notion of healthcare. I think every community rallied around their frontline healthcare workers to find personal protective equipment and things of that sort. But we've, as a result of COVID-19, have built a much stronger relationship with our local hospitals, to the point where we get on a call for half an hour every week and we talk about what's going on. And there's a very strong appetite to adopt tech to make things better, more resilient, more efficient, things of that sort. We had those relationships before, but there's nothing like, necessity is the mother of all invention, and that need has generated the acceleration of sort of the maturation of those relationships, and that's going to translate into actual projects and actual initiatives to help address these issues.
Thank you all so much. I know there's so much more we could talk about, and I know we had plans to talk about more, but we're running out of time here. So I think maybe Mark and Lauren will bring you back for for another one, because there really is so much to talk about, and COVID has really, as you guys have said, brought up a lot of new issues and new things to think about. So thank you, Stefan, Jordan, and Kevin.